So, first of all, I want to thank distinguished members of this House who have participated in this debate, particularly Solanki ji, who made a very valuable contribution. And of course, all distinguished members, Shivanand Tiwari ji, Shiva ji, Rajiv ji, from whom I keep on learning lessons in democracy, because I'm a good learner, and Mungerkar ji, and all distinct Bandopadhyay ji, O'Brien, distinguished members of this House. And what the sense that I got was that सभी लोग चाहते हैं कि जो संशोधन है इसको पारित किया जाए, अच्छा संशोधन है, लेकिन कुछ और कई ऐसी बातें हैं जिस पे हमें सोचना होगा, और सोचकर अगर और कोई ज़रूरत हो और संशोधन की तो वो भी संशोधन करना पड़ेगा। अदीप जी ने भी सवाल उठाए और मैं प्रयास करूंगा कि सबका जवाब दूं। First of all, sir, I want to say that, and I said so in the opening address, that this is not about central government and state government. It's about all of us. If we want to empower our children through education, then what we need to do is to sit down together, address the issues together, and see how we can help each other in empowering our children.
Next bill.
Take, for example, 25% reservation, which was worrying several distinguished members of this House. Where will the money come from? VP Singh talked about that. Well, the fact of the matter is we made a calculation that the kind of contribution that we'd be making to private schools for the 25% reservation is around 6 to 19,000, depending on where the school is located throughout India. And in 80 to 90% of private schools throughout India, which is why it is not urban-centric, the charges by private institutions are less than 19,000. So in fact, all the private schools located in far-flung areas in the country would be happy to receive the contribution because their school fees are less than the contribution that is going to be made by the central government. We're talking about 2, 3, perhaps 400 schools in the country where the fees are much higher, who have occupied the maximum national space when looking at the provisions of this Act. This Act is not about that 25%. That's only one feature of this Act to make this society more egalitarian, as Mungerkar ji said. The idea is inclusive education. The idea is to allow those exclusive communities who don't look beyond their doors to get a peep into the real world. And when two children, one belonging to the less advantaged group and the other belonging to the exclusive group, enter together in class 1, they have no barriers. They don't understand the difference between the rich and the poor. So when they will grow up together from class 1, we're not putting somebody into class 6. It is going to take 8 years for that school to have 25% reservation. And the child who will be in class 1, he will be in class 8 after 8 years, and therefore people will start getting into class 1. And so when they grow up together, they will have a better feel of India. And that's really the vision of the government, that we want a more egalitarian and a more inclusive society, and that's the thinking behind it. It's not about the 3 R's that Solanki ji was talking about. In today's world, nobody is looking at the 3 R's. We're looking at a different definition of education. Perhaps literacy today should include even digital literacy as we move forward. The 3R definition was a definition way back in the 70s and the 80s, but not anymore. We're talking about comprehensive continuous evaluation. There's a section 29 in the Act which talks about an academic authority and the kind of knowledge that should be imparted to children. So we have moved away from the 3 R's. And in fact, very much concerned with the 3 H's that you talked about when you referred to Mahatma Gandhi ji. और बिल्कुल सही आपने कहा, जब तक अपने हाथ से और दिमाग से और दिल से काम नहीं लोगे तब संपूर्ण शिक्षा नहीं मिलेगी, और वही हम चाहते हैं। इसीलिए आने वाले दिनों में आप को ये भी पता चलेगा कि हम एक वोकेशनल एजुकेशन का प्रोग्राम बनाने जा रहे हैं जो 9वीं क्लास से शुरू होगा, 9वीं, 10वीं, 11वीं और 12वीं में, ताकि जो बच्चा है वो तय कर ले कि क्या वो वोकेशनल एजुकेशन लेना चाहता है, क्या वो एकेडमिक लेना चाहता है, या वोकेशनल लेता है तो एकेडमिक के जा सकता है, एकेडमिक लेता है तो वोकेशनल की तरफ भी जा सकता है। तो वो परिवर्तन हम ला रहे हैं ताकि बच्चे की सोच बदले, और जो कंज्यूमरिज्म है हिंदुस्तान में और सारे विश्व में फैला हुआ है उससे अलग होके बच्चा पूरी तरह से एम्पावर हो, यह हमारी सोच है और इसी संदर्भ में हम आगे बढ़ेंगे। And Mungekar ji was right. The less advantaged members of the community do feel victimized. And that's the issue that we have to address. And unless we address that issue, we'll not be able to succeed and not be able to empower our children. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. And in any case, laws are not going to ultimately empower people. It is the commitment of society and stakeholders in society that are ultimately going to make sure whether this act is going to be successful or not. कार्यान्वयन की जो बात आपने की कि एक विधेयक तो आपने बना लिया, उसका कार्यान्वयन कैसे होगा, ये केवल केंद्र सरकार की ही जिम्मेदारी नहीं है, राज्य सरकारों की जिम्मेदारी। असलियत में राइट टिल द 70s जो शिक्षा का क्षेत्र था वो राज्य सरकार था, जिम्मेदारी राज्य सरकारों की थी। और उसके बाद जब वो कंकरेंट लिस्ट में आया तो हमने साझेदारी के साथ कोशिश की कि किसी ना किसी तरीके से राज्य सरकारों को पूरी तरह से मदद की जाए ताकि जो कारवां है वो आगे बढ़े। एंड इट इज विद दिस इन माइंड दैट वी अप्रोच एजुकेशन, सर। So I just want to address a very important issue raised by my learned colleague Rajiv ji when he talked about the fact that I was not responding to the suggestions that he had made. Quite frankly, if you give a very broad definition of disabilities, you allow courts to interpret disabilities in any and every manner that they want. And that creates a lot of confusion in society. In fact, my effort is to, in fact, make sure that the definitions are tight so that there is no room for ambiguity. There is no room for interpretation. And what the government is doing, and something that I can share with you, is that we are, in fact, going to amend the Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act 1995 and the National Trust for Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities Act 1999. And the Social Welfare Ministry is in fact carrying out a complete amendment of this act. And so they will look at all possible disabilities which can be clearly defined to put into this act. And by virtue of 2D, once that act is amended, it will automatically be a part of this act. So it is not that we are not aware of this, and it's not that we don't want to move forward, but we want the appropriate ministry which is charged with that responsibility to give us a legal framework in respect of all possible disabilities, including dyslexia, so that that's automatically incorporated in this act and is dealt with under this act. And therefore, it's not as if under the previous provisions of the act it was not included. That could have been done by notification. But we brought this provision because we didn't want the executive only to decide that. Once it is part of the act, then it becomes something permanent, and therefore nobody can play around with it. So, sir, it is not that we are not responsive to what you say. It's just that we believe that a bigger exercise must be done, taking into account the global movement in this area, and then have a clear, definite definition of the kind of differently abled people who we wish to help under this act. And the reason why I couldn't use the other term is because the The definition of the Act is taken under the 1995 Act and the 1999 Act. And that talks about disabilities. Otherwise, in my expressions publicly, I never use the word disability. I always use the word differently abled, and I've always said that each one of us sitting here is differently abled. It's not just the children of our country. Each one of us is differently abled. And I might also share with you that as we grow older, we will be differently abled in different ways, and we will need help. Some will be hard of hearing, some will lose their memory, some will lose their short-term memory, some will lose their long-term memory. So we shouldn't look at differently abled people with any sense of discrimination. We are all sufferers of that in our lives, in our daily lives. And therefore they are as much equal to us as we are to them. And therefore any legislation that makes any kind of difference between differently abled people is not the kind of legislation that we want in this country. We want them to be a part of our system, to be integrated into the education system, and we need to be as sensitive to them as we are with normal people who they say don't suffer from any disabilities. That's the attitude of this government, sir, and I wish to assure Rajivji that this government is certainly not looking at that issue with blinkered eyes. Something about minority institutions, sir. Now the Supreme Court judgment has come, and the Supreme Court judgment makes it very clear that under Article 29 and 30, unaided minority institutions will not be governed by the provisions of this Act. And in terms of Section 1(4), subject to the provisions of Articles 29 and 30 of the Constitution, the provisions of this Act shall apply to conferment of rights on children to free and compulsory education. So this is subject to 29 and 30. Supreme Court has declared the law under 29 and 30 and clearly said that unaided private institutions are not governed by the provisions of this Act. So that clarity is given by the Supreme Court. That law cannot be changed. That's the final verdict of the Supreme Court. But aided institutions are covered. Aided institutions are covered, but under this amendment now, even aided institutions, the management committees will not be governing the minority institutions. Advisory. Because they'll only have an advisory function. Therefore, we have in fact made a departure. Whereas under the Supreme Court judgment, aided institutions would be covered. By virtue of this amendment, we said aided institutions will not be covered. And they will be covered only in an advisory capacity. So in a sense, we have moved 2 steps further to protect the interests of minority institutions. So Adibji, I request you, please be assured that we are extremely sensitive to the concerns of the minority community, and if you walk 2 steps, we will walk 10 in order to make sure that their interests are fully protected. This government, this UPA government, the UPA chairperson, our Prime Minister is always extremely concerned about this. There are issues that I have no answers to. For example, several distinguished members raised the issue about malnourished children. I mean, that's a national issue that we need to be concerned about. It's as much a concern of the state governments as it is of the central government. Health, as you know, is a state subject. And we need to, as a central government, take care of our children. So I don't think that we should be really talking at cross purposes on this. Malnourished children are our children. They may be living in one state, be living in another state. We should not raise issues about state and center, what you are doing about it. We need to sit together. I need to sit together with Tiwari ji and say, what can we do in Bihar? Together. What can we do in Tamil Nadu together? And in other parts of the country, though Tamil Nadu, in terms of nourishment, is ahead of many other states. So the point is that these are issues I don't have any answers to. I don't think that I can provide answers by virtue of this amendment. But all I can say is that under Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, we are providing midday meals and we are providing nourished meals to children. But of course, as people say, the child's mind grows till the age of 5. So by the time he enters school, the mind is already grown. Now, what kind of nutrients the child gets during the course after childbirth is something that the nation needs to be concerned about. And if 50% of our children are malnourished, it's a national issue and we need to address it. I, on the floor of this House, can't give you answers for that. Neither can I give you answers for children who are in the villages, who don't go to school, who go out and help their mothers and in the farm, or children in my own constituency, in the mandi, who come from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh and who are working out there in the mandi as child labor. All we are telling the chief ministers to do is to make sure that there is a school there and make sure that the school that is set up is a residential school. Because children away from the parents will go back to work unless you give them a residential school. So I'll be working with state governments and telling state governments, wherever you have a problem of children and of child labor, or children who are out of school and have no home to go to, then provide for residential schools. And let's work together a scheme through which residential schools can be provided so that those children can be housed there, so that they don't go out again. These of course are some of the issues that we all need to address together. It is and then of course there was a very important issue raised by Bharat Kumar ji. He talked about access to differently abled children. How does he go up 3 floors? And he is right. But then under the schedule to the Act, we have provided that all schools must give access to differently abled children. That is a prescription under the Act. Each school has to provide for that. And where that's not provided for, it is incumbent on the school to make sure that it is provided. Similarly, I can't answer the question of teachers. I think overnight we are not going to get the teachers. For dealing with children with special needs. But at the same time, now we are giving, under the NCTE, we have issued a notification which provides for persons holding D.Eds in special education and B.Eds in special education who will be eligible to become teachers in regular schools. So we are providing the necessary educational framework in order that teachers can be provided, but how many actually will go into this profession? I mean, that again, the central government does not decide. You know, the recruitment of teachers take place. Rajya Sarkaron में Solanki जी recruitment होती है. उनकी terms and conditions क्या होती हैं, वो राज्य सरकारें तय करती हैं. उनकी पेंशन क्या रहेगी, किस किस्म के लोग टीचर बनेंगे, वो हम तय नहीं करते. वो राज्य सरकारें तय करती हैं. तो हमारा तो यही प्रयास रहेगा कि हम राज्य सरकार के साथ काम करके ये कोशिश करें कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा टीचर्स स्पेशल नीड्स चिल्ड्रन विद स्पेशल नीड्स के लिए हम तैयार करें, और उसमें जो भी सहायता हम दे सकते हैं केंद्र सरकार की तरफ से, वो हम देने के लिए तैयार हैं. और जहाँ तक राशि का सवाल है, अगर हम सर्व शिक्षा अभियान के अंतर्गत आगे बढ़ते रहे तो 11th प्लान के आखिरी साल में जो राशि राज्य और केंद्र सरकार की थी वो 50-50% रहती. लेकिन राइट टू एजुकेशन के बाद हमने वो बात अलग कर दी और ये हमने 65 और 35% हिस्सेदारी की है. तो हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं, और अगर 8-9-10% हमारा ग्रोथ अगले कुछ सालों में होगा तो निश्चित रूप से राशि भी बढ़ेगी और हम और सहायता भी करेंगे. लेकिन ये रास्ता कोई अकेला रास्ता नहीं है, किसी एक का रास्ता नहीं है, केंद्र सरकार का रास्ता नहीं है, ये देश का रास्ता है, राज्य सरकारों का रास्ता है, सिविल सोसाइटी का रास्ता है, मिलजुल के आगे बढ़ने का रास्ता है. इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं आपका शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि आपने मुझे मौका दिया और आपने इस कानून का समर्थन देने का आपने तय किया. धन्यवाद.